Donald Trump's first nominee to the Supreme Court, Judge Neil Gorsuch, will be in the hot seat starting today for his confirmation hearing in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Will he have an easy path to the bench? Well, joining us is Jamil, Jaffer, a law professor at the Antonin Scalia Law School at George Mason University. Jamil was also a law clerk for Judge Gorsuch, so an unusual and very special guest. Good morning, Jamil.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So let's talk about the toughest questions that could be covered today.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big questions that are going to be out there are what kind of a judge will Neil Gorsuch be? Will he apply the law fairly and evenly to the litigants before him? And what's his judicial philosophy?
He's often asked why he rules in favor of businesses and corporate interests. What will his answer to those questions be?
Look, I think that if you look at his record, 10 years on the bench, over 2,000 cases decided, the reality is that he rules in favor of a lot of individuals, a lot of employees, in case after case after case, whether it's cases involving black lung or sexual discrimination or sexual harassment. He has ruled in favor of plaintiffs. So the notion that somehow you can cherry pick 3 or 4 cases and suggest that's his record, it's just not accurate.
Interesting. So if he's asked what judge he admires most, justice admires most, what do you think he might have an answer for that?
You know, I don't want to get ahead of his answers at the hearing. I have an instinct about who it might be. There are a lot of judges, justices of the Supreme Court who have previously served in the executive branch like Judge Gorsuch has, and I think they represent models of what it means to leave the executive branch and go to the Supreme Court or go to an appellate court. I think Judge Gorsuch is that kind of judge, the kind of judge who can leave his advocacy and his politics behind and just be a professional, a judge's judge.
But he clerked for Justice Kennedy, no?
He clerked for both Justice White and Justice Kennedy.
Interesting. Okay. You know, as we head into these hearings this week and today, there hasn't, or I haven't noticed a strong opposition against him. Would you think that's valid?
Look, I think that's a fair point. I mean, I think what's really interesting about this debate, you know, I was up at the Supreme Court the day of the nomination, and I saw these protesters carrying signs that said oppose, and they just had a blank spot where you could write in the name of whoever the nominee was. And I got up there, and they'd just written in Gorsuch, and it's really unfortunate we've come to that point in the process. And I'm hopeful that the Senate will look past that sort of approach and really take a look at his record, a fair look at his record. That
doesn't have a lot of merit or evidence that comes behind it. Overall, though, as Gorsuch now faces this hearing, and we heard from Ted Cruz saying 60 votes or some other way, so how do you think he'll actually get this nomination and goes through?
Look, I think the right thing to do here is for him to not even have to worry about this whole notion of a filibuster, because the reality is he's a mainstream judge. He's got a 10-year record. Anyone can look at it and say, look, this is a guy who's a good judge. He shouldn't even be subject to filibuster. I think the Senate should just give him an up or down vote on the merits, and let's move on.
All right. Jamil, Jaffer, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.